We hope that this will provide you with information for the upcoming election. The candidates for Athens County Auditor are Jill Thompson and Rick Wasserman, and we thank both of them for making the time to join us tonight. So a few things to think about before we get into the meat of the program tonight. Please make sure you have a plan for voting for this November election. You still have time to register to vote. The deadline is October 11th. And then early voting starts the next day on October 12th. If you want to vote by mail, you must submit an absentee ballot request form. And those absentee ballots will start being mailed out to voters on October 12th. And finally, remember that Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. You can verify your polling place by contacting the Board of Elections office or going to the League's website, vote411.org. If anybody who is here in person needs voting reminders or to request an absentee ballot, we can help you after the event. In addition to these candidate forums, our League publishes a voter guide where candidates answer written questions. Our voter guide will be available online on vote411.org. We are currently finishing up all of the details, and we're hoping for, well, it should be live by the end of September with all of the Athens County information. And it will be published in a print version in both the Athens Messenger and the Athens News in early October. The League of Women Voters is dedicated to expanding public awareness about government issues and encouraging active participation in government. The League does not support or oppose political parties or candidates. Please visit our local league online at athensleagueofwomenvoters.org. You can learn more about our
media representative present, questions submitted by the public, either previously or tonight, and a closing statement also of 2 minutes from each candidate. The order for speaking will rotate, and I will indicate who speaks first. The candidates can see our timekeeper, who will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining in his or her talk, 15 seconds remaining, and when the time has expired. If a candidate continues speaking, I will say thank you and move on. Candidates are invited to share their qualifications and their experience and to talk about their plans and proposals. Candidates are asked to focus on topics relevant to the stated questions and to avoid personal attacks and raising issues that are unrelated to the office being sought. If they go outside these guidelines, I may stop them to remind them of these guidelines. To the audience members, please turn off your cell phones. We request that you treat each candidate fairly. Please remain quiet throughout the forum. No clapping, cheering, or calling out, or stomping of feet. With the exception that after the closing statements, you may clap for both candidates if you wish. We received questions by email before tonight's forum, and we are taking questions from the audience here. You are encouraged to submit questions for the candidates on the provided paper that's on your chairs. Questions must be answerable by both candidates and must apply to issues or qualifications for their office. Raise your hand if you'd like another piece of paper or to have your question collected. Please make sure your questions are written legibly. We all have to be able to read it, and it would be too bad if I gave a stupid question just because I couldn't read what you wrote. All questions are reviewed by a league panel. The panel removes any questions that cannot be answered by both candidates, or are statements rather than questions, or are duplicates of other questions. We will use as many questions as the time allows, striving to cover a variety of topics and planning to move to the closing statements at 8:20. We now begin with our opening statements. Rick Wasserman will speak first, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good evening, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and thank you, Auditor Thompson, for agreeing to appear here as well. For the last 4.5 years, I've had the distinct honor and pleasure of serving Athens County as your treasurer. The treasurer is the chief tax collector, as most of you know all too well. I'm also the investment officer and a critical part of the checks and balances of county government. I was both appointed and elected treasurer in 2018, and prior to that I had 25 years experience in local business, contributing to the tax base and experiencing the discipline, making a payroll twice a month, every year. I have a bachelor's degree in business communications from our very own Ohio University. The auditor's office is one of the most critical positions in county government. I like to call it the center of the wheel of county government. I seek the auditor's office because I know I can do the job well. I feel after 22 years of one auditor, it's time for a new approach. I have a positive vision for the auditor's office, one that involves cooperation and collaboration with other offices and not quite so much conflict. The auditor should serve as a resource to fiscal officers throughout the county. Those fiscal officers should feel supported by the auditor's office. Everybody thinks this position is about finance and real estate. And you know, certainly on one level it is. But these county positions are really about relationships. In the work I've done as treasurer, I have won the trust of the people in our villages, townships, and county agencies, and I have the positive relationships necessary to succeed. Finally, having had a front row seat observing the auditor's office for the last 4.5 years, I am uniquely positioned to take this office to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick. Next, we'll hear from Jill Thompson.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this evening, to the citizens of Athens County for attending and viewing tonight's forum for the Office of Athens County Auditor. It's been my privilege to serve as your county auditor for nearly 22 years. Running for office is challenging, but I'm so thankful for every person that I meet and the overwhelming support that I've received. I take no vote for granted. This isn't a part-time job or something that I do as a hobby. Serving at the feet of the people of Athens County is humbling, hard work, takes dedication and commitment. Thank you for offering me this opportunity. When serving the public, it helps when you're from here. I was born in Athens, raised on a large farm in Alexander Township, and graduated from Alexander High School. It was a blessing to live in a college town, and it's the only way I could afford to get a college degree. I worked 3 part-time jobs while attending Ohio University and graduated with a degree in finance. After graduation, I was offered a position in the county auditor's office, and that's when I knew I had a passion for public service. My experience includes leadership. In 2010, I was elected by my peers and served as president of the County Auditors Association of Ohio. And in order to take office to the next level, I went back to college, and in 2013 graduated with a master's in financial economics from Ohio University, Pickerington. I graduated with a 4.0 and was inducted into the Phi Kappa Phi Honor Society. In 2017, I was elected as president of the Ohio Government Finance Officers Association of Ohio. I've had the honors to serve on legislative, executive, and various ad hoc committees. I've earned over 1,500 hours of community service, of continuing education, presented at many conferences, professional organizations, including presentations here locally. Leadership is really just about helping others. I couldn't do this job if I wasn't passionate about this county, this community, and most importantly, the people that I serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Now we move to the question and answer portion of the forum. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Candidates, if you should need a question repeated, please ask and I will be happy to do so. We'll begin with questions from our media representative, Nicole Layton from the Athens Messenger.
We are limited on our microphones, so.
Okay, cool. Get a microphone. All right, my question is, I'm Nicole Layton with the Athens Messenger. What do you think the biggest challenge is, facing that Athens County is facing today, and how would you, if elected, how would your office address that challenge?
Thank you, Nicole, for the question. I think, if I understand correctly, what's the biggest challenge facing Athens County today, and what would I do to address that challenge? Right now, I think the biggest challenge facing Athens County is our economy. We've been faced with some really hard times lately, and when I go door to door and meet with folks, I see individuals that are really facing some difficult challenges due to high gas prices, groceries, right? Things that we're facing, and a lot of uncertainty and instability. So I think that right now, what we really need to do is be an advocate for the people.
During the pandemic, and though it's come back somewhat now, it's left a lot of businesses in a lurch, and it's left a lot of taxpayers who rely on those students in a lurch. And I say perverse because what also happened during the pandemic is that real estate prices went through the roof. So you've seen valuations go up significantly across the county. And when I talk to people, there are folks who are having trouble paying the property taxes that they have to pay, and they don't necessarily understand why their valuations are what they are. And I think that the auditor is correct in talking about programs like the homestead exemption. And, you know, if I were to become auditor and join the Auditors Association, I would be talking to that organization about lobbying the state legislature to reform that program and take it back to the way it was under the Strickland administration, where there was no income test for it. There's no reason why people over 65 need to worry about being thrown out of their home because they can't afford their property taxes. We live in a state with a $6 billion surplus and $2 billion of unspent ARPA funds. They could use some of those funds to help senior citizens stay in their houses. I don't hear anybody talking about this at the state level currently, but I sure would be.
Thank you, Rick. Now we'll move to questions from the public. The first question I have, and Rick can answer this question first, what are the most important qualifications for a county auditor?
Well, it's such a broad job. You know, it is a fact that the portfolio of the county auditor is ridiculously broad. It seems like almost everything they couldn't think of a place for, they put into the auditor's office. You're not just in charge of paying all the bills and doing the payroll. You're also in charge of all the real estate, all the appraisals, all the transfers, and let's just throw in dog tags with it. So I think that you have to have the ability to manage a lot of different things at one time. You have to have the ability to collaborate with people. It is so important to be able to work with folks. As I mentioned in my opening statement, this job is about relationships. You have to be able to reach out to other people, get the experts you need in a room, or get the stakeholders that you need to talk to in a room, and make sure that everybody has a say and everybody is heard. And I just think that the type of leader who can do that will be the most successful in a position like this.
Thank you. Jill?
Thank you, Marcia. The qualifications for county auditor are broad, and the real estate background is important because that's a big part of my job. Being able to value property properly, fairly, and equitably is important to homeowners. Making sure that the books are kept and the accounting is done is also important. And my finance and accounting background go a long way with that. We've received the Award for Outstanding Achievement in Popular Annual Financial Reporting for the past 17 years. And we have received the Certificate of Achievement in Excellence in Financial Reporting from GFOA for the last 30 years. My predecessor's in the room tonight, and he was the one who actually started those awards and recognitions, and I am proud to have been able to carry out that legacy. Understanding accounting, finance, government, all of that is important, and understanding real property value is also important. That shouldn't be understated. And so in 2000, I believe it was in 2013, I actually went back and took the coursework. I was trying to see if I had it listed here, and I probably do and just can't find it. But there's a course that you can take through IAAO that actually qualifies you as a project manager on a project for a mass appraisal project. We use ad valorem appraisal, and it's not a typical appraisal process. So I got certified to do that, not because I needed to be the manager of my project, but that because I needed the expertise and understanding to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Our next question, and Jill, you get to answer it first. How do you, or would you, keep abreast of changing auditing standards and legislation related to public finance?
Marcia, thank you. That's such a good question. I don't know who asked it, but I am a creature of statute, and so anything and everything that I do as the Athens County Auditor is directed to me by the Ohio Revised Code. And there is a reason they call it revised, because it seems like as soon as you figure out how to interpret one section of code, it changes. Mayor, you're smiling. I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it is an art to be able to stay on top of it, to be able to understand the law, to be able to work within the framework of it, and be able to go forward that way. There's a reason I have over 1,500 hours of continuing education. It is because the law is ever changing. There's a reason I sit on so many committees and have led associations, because network and relationships are important. And the way you get to be president of a statewide elected officials association is building networks and relationships, being reliable, loyal.
To when I became treasurer, when the auditors and treasurers and the prosecutors are the only office holders that are required to do continuing education on a yearly basis. When I first became treasurer, they informed me that I had to get 2 years worth of continuing education hours within the first 3 months that I was treasurer. So I spent, a lot of time running all over the state trying to take courses and get the information that I needed. But really, the associations that we have are tremendous benefits to people who are office holders. The Treasurers Association for Treasurers, the Auditors Association for Auditors. And I would certainly seek help from those folks. As well as, I have studied the code, and I would continue to study the code. We have a fantastic prosecutor here in Athens County, and he has a civil assistant who works a lot with us in all of our offices and makes sure that we know what it is we need to do. In terms of accounting standards, I would, as Auditor Thompson has, I would join the GFOA, which of course is sort of the gold standard organization in terms of interpreting and technical assistance for accounting standards and auditing standards and that sort of thing. I'm a quick study. I get into something, I find out what it's all about, I plunge myself into it, and I find out what I need to know and then apply it. And that's exactly what I would do in this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, the next question is yours. As leader of the auditor's office, how would you ensure that your departments are working effectively and efficiently?
Well, you have to be a leader. You have to be a leader that people want to work for. You have to go in every day and you have to set the example. You have to know everything that's done in your office in order to be able to teach it to other people. The auditor's office has suffered from tremendous turnover over the last several years. When I took office in June of 2018, there were about 15 people who worked in the office. Today, there are 3 of those people left. And some of those people have been replaced more than once. I feel like you have to make it an environment that people want to come to work and work in. You have to make it an environment where people feel valued. And I feel that the leader has to know how everything works so that you're able to show folks exactly how it needs to be done. And, I come out of business. The number one thing is service. Service to the taxpayer. It's just like you have a business. You don't service your customers properly, they're not going to come back. Well, obviously in government, they have to come back. They don't have anywhere else to go. But the goal is to create a service-centered environment where people feel that they can come to that office and get what they need and be supported. And I do that with constant communication and open door policy and the ability to work with people in a way that they feel comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill?
Thank you, Marcia, for that question. It's almost, I guess I'm not quite sure how to respond to some of those comments, but let me just tell you, when you've been an elected official for over 2 decades, I know this might be shocking, people retire. They retire with 30 plus years of service, 20 plus years of service. They retire because that's why you work every day, work hard to be able to enjoy those types of things. And there are situations in which folks go to other jobs and relocate. My real estate manager fell in love, got swept off her feet, and ran off to Gallia County, and she now works for the Gallia County Auditor, and I still adore her, and I still work with her every chance that I get. I care about my staff. I care about them just like they are my family. And you're right, it is important to lead. It's important to actually be at the office to be there as a resource when they have questions and when they need help. Anybody who's been in my office knows I'm there. They know I show up, and they know I stay late, and they know that I'm available. And there's often a line outside my door. I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had. I've actually increased efficiencies and effectiveness during my 22 years significantly. If you live in Athens County, you know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill, the next question is also for you. How are house values assessed, and are they affected by inflation?
How are home values assessed, and how are they affected by inflation? So what I actually conducted my thesis for Ohio University for my master's in economics program, which Dr. Vetter actually attributed as one of the greatest ones that he'd read. I was also interested in what drives property values and why, what actually impacts that. Aside from the fact that I've worked with IAAO and I've been certified as a project manager, that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to know what drove housing prices. And I'll tell you what really interested me was when we had the housing crisis of 2007 and 2008. Did you know in Athens County, our values didn't go down? They actually went up. And it absolutely blew me away. And so I wouldn't stop until I figured it out. So that's what I did my thesis on, was I did a 20-year history of values in Athens County to try and figure out what the variables were that drove values. And it happens that it is two things. It is population and income. So if inflation is a part of our economy in the future, and those escalating prices of costs of living, right, they are going to drive down income, and that can drive down home prices. So I can stop there. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question for me, just real quick?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
Excuse me?
Can you repeat the question for me?
Yes.
Thank you.
How are house values assessed, and are they affected by inflation?
So housing values are assessed on the county level by doing what's called a bulk appraisal or an ad valorem appraisal, where someone goes out, a team of people go out, and they visit literally every property in the county every 6 years. And then they do an update every 3 years. But when they visit the property, it's typically just an outside appraisal. They walk around the outside, they measure the outside of the building, and they have a list of formulas based on the neighborhood that it's in and a whole bunch of other factors to arrive at value. And of course, well, everything's affected by inflation. If you have people buying a lot of houses and the prices are going up all over the place, that goes up. But the real thing that you have to take away from this is that we have what I would call a very opaque process of appraisal here in Athens County. The appraisals get done, letters get sent out every 3 to 6 years, and people have no idea whatsoever what goes into the appraisal of their house. And there must be more transparency into this process, and I would be absolutely committed to creating that.
Thank you. Rick, the next question is for you. Again, what would you propose to help Athens County residents better understand the work of the auditor's office?
Thank you for the question. Again, it comes back to transparency. It comes back to getting out into the community and talking to people and making sure that they understand the various factors that affect their home valuations, that they understand the programs that are there to help them, including the homestead exemption, the 2.5% rollback. I think at the county level currently we do the bare minimum in terms of educating people about these types of things. The auditor and I used to do a joint insert in the tax bills, where one side of the tax bill was stuff that I needed to put out there and the other side of the tax bill was stuff that the auditor needed to put out there. And it was actually a fun collaboration putting it together. And then when the bill came in, I brought it across the hall and said, well, how are we going to pay for this? And the auditor says, well, I'm not paying for that. And I said, well, we did it together. And so we haven't done it together since then. So that's one less way in which the information is getting out there. So in my opinion, a good auditor, just like a good treasurer, is out in the county, is out in the community all the time, talking to people, visiting senior citizen groups, visiting community groups, educating people wherever you go on what the salient issues are that affect the pocketbooks of the people in Athens County.
Thank you. Jill?
Yeah, I'll go back that we do use an ad valorem mass appraisal process, and we really do make a difference. The folks of Athens County know that we meet with property owners. They know that we offer informal opportunities to do that. And mass appraisal is a bit of a difficult challenge because we actually pay less than $15 in appraisal for over 46,000 parcels. That can be tough. But yeah, my opponent doesn't like to give you all the facts, that's for sure. We do go out and do community meetings. We do meet with homeowners, and often we actually go to their residence to make sure that we have the information correct. As far as transparency in the office, I'll tell you, again, if you remember when I took office compared to what it is now, we work very diligently to make sure that we have as much information online as possible, that we have interactive information. We email and communicate with our constituents on a regular basis, and we try very hard to meet them where they are and make sure that the information is available to them. So I think sometimes my opponent forgets where the taxpayers' money comes from. It comes from you. And it doesn't really matter if it comes out of my budget or his budget, it came out of your pocket. And it was a time when he had budgeted for it, he had not reduced his budget, and he had the funds to pay for it, and yet he wanted to use that money evidently for something else. I'm not quite sure why this became a contentious issue. And the insert looked more like a campaign bulletin and pamphlet than
Jill.
it looked like an information piece. Thank you.
The next question is for Jill. Why don't you inspect the interiors of houses as part of the valuation process, for looking for new paint, cracked plaster, flooded basements, and so on?
Thank you, Marcia. So we do generally an exterior inspection of property valuation or property values. We have data collectors that go out into the field, yes, once every 6 years. The last one was in 2020. And we do a triennial update the 3 years in between. Those are based solely on sales ratio studies. The reason we do an exterior inspection is because we could not possibly do an interior inspection of over 46,000 parcels in Athens County in every 6 years. It takes us even the way we're doing it, it takes us 2 years to conduct a full appraisal. And that's with an exterior inspection. But we do provide hang tags. We leave them for homeowners when we're not there. If the homeowner's there, we interview the homeowner and ask about those types of attributes about their home. And we've also enhanced our website significantly, and you've probably seen that. So you can get online and see what attributes we have about your home. You can see your conditions, your grades, and all of that information. And you are welcome to contact us if we have any of that information incorrect. So that's a really important part of it. And another factor that we did not too long ago, we've certainly increased our imagery, and we use oblique photography now, which allows for a 45-degree angle in 6 different directions. We can actually measure your home from the tools that we have in the office. And we can update our information, obviously, or also using sales listings, and make sure that the information we have is accurate and correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is one of those odd questions that comes up at a forum sometimes, where there really is only one answer, and it's almost impossible for the other person to say anything different. The fact is, when you're talking about the number of structures that we have, 66,000 parcels, 40-whatever thousand structures, it'd be almost impossible in a 2-year period to go out and evaluate the insides of everybody's houses, let alone coordinate when people were going to be home to let you in, right? So most of us are at the office during the day or somewhere where we need to be. And so that would be extremely difficult. And I do have to say that it is, somewhat of an amazing gargantuan task that it's able to be done in just 2 years. Because when you think about all the places that you have to go and all the country roads that you have to drive down, that would be almost impossible. So I think that it is somewhat on the burden of the taxpayer to look at the valuation letters that they get and to determine whether or not this seems reasonable. And my idea of bringing this process to the people so that somebody who lives in Marshfield has a chance to go to the New Marshfield Senior Center 1 time or 2 times out of a 6-year period and meet with people from the auditor's office makes it that much more convenient for them to go in and talk about their house and say, well, we tore that porch down last year. And no, we don't have a finished basement. And this way, we're able to bring it to the people and give people a better chance to make sure that the information the county has on their house is correct.
Thank you. The next question is for you, Rick. As leader of the auditor's office, how would you ensure that your employees have the knowledge and resources to do their job?
Well, that's a great question. It comes down to training, and it comes down to working with people every day to make sure that they have the opportunities for professional development that they need to grow into their own roles. In the treasurer's office, we spend a lot of time working on processes, making sure that things are written down so that the next person who comes in knows what they're doing. A high turnover in an office will contribute to things falling through the cracks, and that's a serious problem in an office. You can't have that happening. And the leader of the office has to know how to do all of the individual tasks in the office so that you can teach people that. And I think that I've been really very good with that. And that's certainly been one of my strong points, both in business and in the treasurer's office. And I expect that if I'm elected auditor and I move over to that office, which has a larger staff, be able to meet with everybody individually, talk about what everybody's goals are, and figure out how to provide the training necessary so that people are at the absolute top of their game. There's a lot of stuff going on all the time. In all of these positions, you have to be able to manage more than one thing at a time. And you have to have a pretty high tolerance for ambiguity, because sometimes there are unique situations that come up and people have to be given the tools to be able to handle them. And so that's the approach that I would take.
Thank you. Jill, would you make sure that your microphone is a little closer? I'm not sure that everyone can hear.
I will try that. Thank you. Actually, during COVID, there was a point in time when my opponent, his entire staff had been quarantined. And during that week, he did not perform the functions of his office. And when I looked at the Form 6s, they were pretty much, there were a lot of blank spaces on there. So there were two employees there, him and a former employee that had retired, incidentally. But he definitely wasn't doing all the work, and I can show evidence of that. Now, I did work in the office under Pete Kalatis, shortly under David Lovett. I learned many of the roles of the office and actually performed them myself. When I became auditor, it was important to me to build in efficiencies and, of course, make sure that we have proper internal controls. Internal controls are absolutely critical so that you can catch mistakes. If you know me, you know I'm very hands-on with every faction of my office, and some of my staff is here tonight. Sometimes they wish I would be in the office less, and I would be involved not quite so much. But I do stay involved with every faction of it. With over 1,500 hours of education, it is easy for me to help them with the hard problems. It is easy for me to find a contact when we face some difficult obstacles. I know who to call. I know where to get help, and we train them with the training that they need, whether it's Ohio GFOA, the Auditors Association, or another one. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill, are there innovations you are planning to make in the future in the Office of Auditor?
Thank you, Marcia, for the question. I am always looking for how we can do things better, how we can be more efficient, how we can strive to provide a better service at a lower cost, actually, and streamline the work that we do. We continually do that in our real estate division. We work very often with electronic records and making those records available to the public. We do the same thing in finance and the accounting division. So we are actually running integrated computer operating systems now that are some of the probably the most adequate performing or the best performing in the state of Ohio. And they allow a lot of interaction and integration. So when COVID did happen, which was a big challenge for Athens County, we were able to actually operate in a seamless manner. We could continue with payroll, we could continue paying the bills, and my employees were actually able to work remotely when needed to keep my employees safe and to make sure that the work still was getting done. I'm going to continue to do that as auditor. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
Got to go back and address the last one. Sorry, folks. There was an 8-day period where my staff was quarantined years and the land bank to report what they need to. And also, not micromanage other departments in the ways that has happened in the past. We have this thing that happens now where townships and villages, if they carry over a certain amount of funds, they get this letter demanding that they come to the auditor or by letter and explain why they're holding on to their money. Essentially, they're forced to bow down and say, "Mother, may I," if they're being good stewards of their money. If you're saving money for a road repaving that you're going to do the following year, or if you're saving money to build a building. And I think that it is not the role of the auditor to second guess other levels of government. It's the role of the auditor to make sure that the reporting that needs to happen occurs and that the, all of the reporting is in place so that when the state auditor comes looking, they've got what they need.
Thank you. Jill?
The financial records of Athens County are yours, the public. The financial records of the townships and the villages and the cities matter because them being accountable is accountability to you. And Rick's right. We do require that they are accountable for the tax dollars that you pay. I've met a few people who struggle to pay their real estate taxes, and they want to come in and meet with me, and they want to know where those dollars go, and they want to understand if those dollars are needed. And that's critical in Athens County, and especially for our homeowners, to understand that their dollars are being spent wisely. And if it doesn't happen in my office, it doesn't happen. So if we don't question and we don't hold other governments, other local governments accountable, I'm not sure who would or how that would even look. So I do that. And when a county or when a township or a village is actually carrying over more money than they need to spend, we do ask them why. We ask them why because the Ohio statute requires that they show evidence for needing those dollars. And if they don't show evidence for needing those dollars, it is the duty of the Budget Commission to actually reduce those tax levies. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill, the next question is for you. Would you talk a little bit about the auditor's role regarding the land bank program? In what way does the auditor's office support the Athens County Land Bank?
You know, when Bill Bias started the land bank, he came to me and he said, "Jill, I want you to be the treasurer of the land bank." And I said to Bill, "No." And it's not because I don't support the land bank, and it's not because I don't support what you're doing. I think revitalization is a really great thing. But I also think all of the members in county government that sit on the Board of Revision should not be party to a private nonprofit organization called the Athens County Land Bank that has powers that aren't the same as county elected officials and that has the ability to do things that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the residents. The Ohio Supreme Court has faced challenges from land banks concerning due process, just compensation, and separation of powers. What a lot of folks don't know is when the land bank takes the lien, the taxes don't get paid. They get written off. And we've written off hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxes. And those properties aren't always auctioned. They can be given to anybody that the land bank chooses. We've seen tax liens filed more than one time, as many as 3 times. We've seen many questionable actions of the land bank. I'm not part of the land bank because it's not a statutory function of the auditor's office, and because somebody should be independent, somebody should be looking out for the property owner and making sure that the process has independence. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
The property owners you're talking about long since left town. those property owners left their properties abandoned and tax delinquent. And I'll point out also that it's statute that elected officials from the county are on the land bank's board. The entire land bank board is made up of elected officials, and that's state law. Let's be frank. The auditor's office has been nothing but an obstacle to the land bank since its creation. The auditor's office has fought tooth and nail for everything against what the land bank has done. We attempted during 2019 and 20 to implement expedited foreclosure, something that the auditor approved of in the beginning and voted for when we started. But because she decided that she didn't like it anymore, we lost over $150,000 in grant money that we could have had to tear down abandoned and tax delinquent houses in Athens County. In 2021, the auditor attempted to get the commissioners to hire a private attorney for her for the purpose of suing the land bank. This is not what we need. The land bank is a tremendous credit to the county and has spurred revitalization in parts of the county where we hadn't seen a new house built in sometimes 10 or 20 years. We have over 100 parcels that have been turned back into productive use. And yes, it is true that when you have a property that goes to the land bank, frequently the taxes get written off. Here's a little secret. They were never going to get paid. No one was ever paying them, and in some cases, the people who were supposed to pay them had died years ago.
Thank you.
So the auditor's office has a tremendous
Thank you,
role in
Rick.
supporting
We'll move
the
on
land
from
bank,
there.
And if I'm elected, it will.
The next question is for you. Please provide an example of a time where you identified a problem within a financial system and say how you resolved it. That's for Rick.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah,
Sorry.
provide an example of a time where you identified a problem within a financial system and say how you resolved it.
Oh, well, that's easy. When I first came to office, the auditor had apparently chosen a new financial system that the county, bought and paid for to, smooth the process of invoices getting to the auditor and all that sort of stuff. The problem is called Munis, referred to universally around the county as the Munis fiasco. The auditor told me, I'm thinking the first month, that all of a sudden my office would be in charge of something completely new that we had never done before. When money is received across the county, let's say at the dog shelter, you go and you adopt a dog and you pay your adoption fee. That money has to get to the county treasurer's office, and that money has to be deposited by the treasurer. Well, that's pretty easy because that money's in cash or credit card. But increasingly, agencies get paid by ACH, that is to say electronically. So I needed to come up with a system where all of the fiscal officers across the county were able to see every single day what ACHs came into the main Athens County funds account, figure out which ones were theirs, and then go ahead and pay that into the county. And so we came up with a system using some technology that most of you probably know. We have a Google Drive system. We publish the information every day. And a member of my staff published a small manual of how to have these agencies do the pay-ins, because there really wasn't much training that came out when this system was implemented. And so in that way, I was able to smooth that process. And it was a great way for me to get to know a lot of the financial people around the county.
Thank you. Jill?
He never ceases to amaze me. One of the problems that we had with the system was that it wasn't properly tracking encumbrances. And I went and I worked with the county commissioners to get that process changed so that we wouldn't have a reporting misstatement. And that was very effective. I didn't ask for an attorney to sue the land bank. I asked for an attorney because the treasurer was the president of the land bank and also the president of the Board of Revision in a foreclosure action. The commissioner also sat on the board on the land bank and on the Board of Revision in the foreclosure action. And the statute stated explicitly that the prosecutor represented the treasurer in these cases. And my treasurer was voting on the cases he was presenting and sending to the land bank. So as a result, I was asking for legal counsel to give me guidance so that I could make good decisions revolving around those situations. And I can tell you that I did request that those actions be suspended, the expedited foreclosures, because of the way they were being handled. And Commissioner Eliason actually agreed with me and we suspended those for a year until another commissioner was able to be recruited to sit in those types of hearings. I think it's really important that when we take people's property, that we do it right, that we follow the law, and that we don't violate their constitutional rights. I don't think that's too much to ask as an elected official. I don't think it's too much to ask as a homeowner or a citizen. And when it comes to taking people's property and filing tax liens, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Jill, would you like to make any changes to the way the auditor's office receives and disburses county funds? If so, why?
No. We have made changes over time. I feel that the system that we're running is very efficient. It's one of the best that is out there on the market today. The commissioners actually worked with me in collaboration, believe it or not, to purchase the system and to be able to spend a pretty significant amount of money to make sure that we had a top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art system. And when we had mandatory trainings, the treasurer's office wasn't available to attend. So it's no wonder that they weren't well trained and didn't understand how to use it effectively. We've tried our best to do that, to come back in and help train folks, and we will continue to do that. It's really important that you have good systems that are transparent. This is an electronic system. It allows us to put all the documents together and to be able to provide those and record those and store them adequately. That's been really important to me and really important for Athens County. It helps us on the accountability side. It helps us during audits. It helps us be accountable to other elected officials and the citizens that it's their money we're spending, right? So we better be doing it right. We better have the supporting documentation. We better make sure it's for a proper public purpose and that we're managing it correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
It's a little hard to see how this question applies to both candidates since I'm not currently on the inside of the auditor's office, but I will say these few things. Any system is only as good as the training of the people who are running it. And everybody has to be trained on what they need to look for, and everybody has to be trained on how to use the system. The auditor points out that the system now allows for the electronic movement of invoices and other documents, and that's really important. But the people running it have to be trained to look for them. There was an incident today at the county commissioners meeting where it was apparently discovered that some reimbursements that were supposed to go from the county auditor's office to the state so that the county could get reimbursed for public defender fees from the municipal court hadn't been done for about 3.5 years. It's being done from the other courts, the Common Pleas Court and the Juvenile Court, but not from municipal. And what is the difference? The difference is that the clerks from the two courts where it had been done were still printing out the document and handing it to people, while the people at municipal court were simply sending them along in the system that the auditor bought and created, and nobody was looking at it. And so from April of 2019 until the middle of this year, we hadn't filed any public defender reimbursements for that court. It seems like it adds up to something close to $70,000, although it's not certain how much of that would have been reimbursed because it's not necessarily reimbursed at 100%. So,
thank you. Rick, the next question is yours. How can the auditor's office help seniors afford to stay in their homes as property taxes keep rising?
Well, thank you. I think we've touched this ground, but I'll be happy to go back over it again. You know, the main program that helps seniors stay in their home is called the Homestead. Advocating in front of the state, as I mentioned, there's a $6 billion surplus in this state right now. What are they spending that on? Probably more tax cuts for people who don't need them. What the state legislature and the governor need to do is reform the homestead exemption program so that it's available to everyone who's over 65. And if I'm elected, you'll be hearing me talk about this quite a lot.
Thank you. Jill?
Thank you, Marcia. We do care about our seniors, our elderly generation, the folks that they're the ones that teach us, right? These are the people that we care about. We have a lot of memories in those homes. And Rick, there's nothing stopping from you from going up to the State House and advocating for this program. This is something that we do. as I said, there are multiple bills right now up there to expand the homestead exemption program, and I think they're all very valid and worthwhile. We do need to do more to keep our senior citizens in their homes and help them understand the terms of the program and the qualifications. I am a longtime board member of the United Seniors, and I actually got termed out twice, so I have to sit out another year. But that's one of the ways that I advocate and help inform and educate seniors is through the United Seniors of Athens County. And really quickly on this issue with the commissioners, I actually have a press release. It's interesting that he knew so much about the case because he wasn't in the commissioner's office when it happened, so I was pretty sure it was staged. And so I don't have the right to actually tell a judge whether or not a case qualifies for reimbursement. That really isn't a role of the auditor's office. So I think it's important that we get that straight, and I submitted a press release tonight just to clear that issue up. Thank you.
Okay. Rick?
According to the folks in the municipal court, the documents were sent to your office. They were just sent electronically, and it was missed. Unfortunately, these things are timely. If they're not sent in within the first 30 days, that's it. You've missed the boat. You got to swim to shore. And so this is money that can never be recovered for the county. In terms of weights and measures, in my research on the office, I found this to be most fascinating. The auditor actually is the sealer under law. And you can certainly deputize somebody to go out. I don't think there are too many counties where the auditor is testing gas pumps themselves. But under law, the auditor is actually that person. And that person usually employs somebody to go out and do that. Everybody's seen the stickers on the gas pumps. Everybody's seen the stickers on the scales. I'm sure that all the equipment is calibrated. And I'm sure that when I get into the office, I'm going to find out a whole lot more about it than I don't currently know. It's hard to see how this question applies to both people. But it's a vitally important role. It's interesting that it's put into the auditor's portfolio. You want to go to the deli, you want to know you buy a pound of roast beef, it's going to be a pound of roast beef. You want to know that a gallon of gas is a gallon of gas. And it's incredibly important that there's somebody from the government making sure that that happens. And I would be proud to be that person.
Thank you. Rick, the next question for you. Does Athens County have a green plastic-free mandate for taxpayer-funded purchases? And if not, are there plans to do so?
That's a fascinating question. I don't believe that we do. The county commissioners are the legislative authority for the county. It would be up to the county commissioners to pass such a rule. And I'm sure that other county offices would fall in line and would embrace that. Obviously, we have a very dire situation in the world today with global warming and the other issues that we have surrounding climate change. Certainly, where the land bank is concerned, we've tried to use green processes wherever we can. When we take down a house, we don't just bulldoze it and send everything to the landfill. We go in and we deconstruct that house and do what we call waste diversion, trying to take things that are usable out of the house, trying to take things that are hazardous out of the house, get them off of the property. You'd be amazed at how many tires wind up at abandoned properties all over the county. In terms of that one particular thing, I don't believe that we currently have such a rule. But again, it would be not up to the auditor to institute that sort of thing. That would have to come from the legislative authority, which again would be the Board of County Commissioners. Thanks.
Jill?
Yes, I don't believe that we have a policy regarding those types of things, and that absolutely would fall under the jurisdiction of the Athens County Board of Commissioners to make those types of decisions for Athens County government. One of the things that I did want to bring up, because I continually am attacked that I don't collaborate and I don't work with other elected officials, which is just untrue. Last year, I actually applied for a grant for the Southeastern Ohio Regional Jail, which was awarded. Actually, I did that in June. I'd asked the commissioners to apply for it. I thought it was really important for an expansion project. Not that we want to put more people in jail, but we need to house them properly. So I did apply for that grant, and we did receive it, and that was almost $2 million. That was also in today's commissioners meeting, and we discussed that. And I can also say that we worked so closely with the departments and agencies during COVID that the health department actually wrote a grant and put an item in there for our office and expressed their appreciation for how well we worked with them and wanted to make sure that we had assistance for the compliance role that we took. We also worked very closely with the CRF funds, and we were one of the leading counties in the state as far as how we handled that, and folks were calling us regularly to get our advice and our help with those processes and procedures for managing CRF funds. Thank you.
Thank you. We're wandering a little bit into rebuttal here. Could I remind you to stick with the questions as they're asked? Jill, this question is for you. How does the auditor's office handle dog licensing? And are any changes needed to the process?
Thank you. The question is, how do we handle dog licensing, and is there changes? Would I be looking for changes to the process? So we actually have a pretty good process for selling dog licenses. We used to use satellite offices, and so we would have partners throughout the county that would also sell them, and we still try to do that on occasion. They literally get a pittance. I want to say it's like 75 cents per tag or something silly like that. So a lot of them don't want to bother doing that. But now we've been able to offer online sales, which certainly makes that a lot easier. And we often have, every year that we've been able, we have someone go out into the community in different locations and sell dog licenses, whether it's at the Kroger in Athens or Trimble or at Tractor Supply. We try to go where people are that have pets. And we care so much about our pets. And I get a lot of excuses as to why folks shouldn't buy dog license. And I think one of my regular questions that we kind of snicker at annually is, why aren't cats licensed? And you know, it's hard enough to corral dogs. You can only imagine corralling cats. But we do, under the guidance, we actually serve as the dog licensing agent for Athens County. The Board of Commissioners sets the rules for licensing and sets the price for licensing, and we do what we can to try and stay at a point where we can make it easy for people to purchase their licenses timely. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
Well, I'm absolutely convinced that the very first thing we need to do is to increase the penalty for dogs caught driving without a license. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I think it's another case where you bring it to the people. I think it's another case where you make it available in lots of places. You know, the Athens County Farmers Market, packed with people every Saturday. They have a booth selling dog licenses at the farmers market. It's good to do it at Tractor Supply, too. It's good to do it in places not in Athens. It's good to do it in the Plains. It's good to do it up in Nelsonville and up in Gloucester, because those people face a significant burden coming all the way down to Athens to get their dog licenses. I had a funny story a couple of years ago. We have a dog, a poodle, and our dog was kind of being menaced, along with my wife, by some other dogs on the road that were kind of running wild. And I did have to call the dog warden. I did have to talk to them about it. And the dog warden came out, and they talked to the owner. And the dog warden came up to my office the next day, kind of like hush-hush, and said, hey, you know, I noticed you don't have an active dog license on the database. And I said, well, yes, of course we do. And apparently we got our dog license during this little period of time where they were selling lifetime dog licenses. And I took a photo of my dog's license and I brought it in. And I guess it probably doesn't work for the county to have lifetime dog licenses, because then you don't get the revenue for it year after year. But I thought it was pretty funny that the guy was calling me out for not having a licensed dog.
Thank you. Rick, what is the role of the Auditor's Office in administering the county's geographic information system?
Well, that's very significant. The Auditor's Office basically implemented the system. The Auditor's Office employs a fellow who's been there for quite some time now. He's one of the 3 people who's still there from 2018. His name is Scott Dunphy. And he manages that system and maintains it. And you know, it works hand in hand with the auditor's role with real estate, because you have to be able to pinpoint locations on the map. You have to be able to provide mapping to folks in the county who need to see stuff. I will say that the auditor's website is quite functional from that standpoint, both in terms of the static maps and what they call the pictometry, which is the system where you're able to view properties at various different angles. And the auditor's office, you know, is done a fairly good job at this particular task. And, you know, I would look for ways to improve it still. I would make sure that we're updating to the latest technology and that people have access to what they need to have.
Thanks. I'm so glad we do something well. Interestingly enough, we actually used to contract for our GIS services, and it wasn't under the Office of the County Auditor. When I became auditor, the county engineer was the coordinator of GIS. And there came a point in which the commissioners actually decided to no longer appoint the engineer as the GIS coordinator. And at that time, I submitted a request to them because I thought it was such an important part of our office that we keep it in-house and that we be able to continue to maintain it. So I asked the commissioners if they would let me have it for a year. I would pay all the costs out of my real estate assessment fund, and if I held it to their satisfaction, if they would let me have it permanently, and they eventually did. So I'm very proud to talk about the fact that another collaboration with county government, we were able to keep the GIS in-house. And we used to contract with Ohio University through a branch called ILGARD. You may be familiar with that. And I actually hired an intern from Hocking College who came and actually developed our fabric and brought it all in-house, so we didn't have to contract out for it. And yes, recently that gentleman did take another.
Since we actually have a little time, Nicole, would you have another media question? Nope? Okay, then we'll move on to our candidates' final statements. And since Rick had the first opening statement, we'll allow Jill to have the first closing statement.
Thank you.
You have 2 minutes for that.
Tonight, I ask that you vote to re-elect me as your Athens County Auditor. Let's not lose track of what's the most important thing in this race, in this election. Athens County is facing some difficult times, increasing fuel costs, groceries. They may seem manageable to some, but for others, it can really be an uphill battle. When knocking doors, I see people from all walks of life, and each one is important, and each one matters. A dear friend, colleague, former elected official, he shared with me that all the qualifications and experience aside, the most important quality for a candidate for elected office, it's kindness, and that stuck with me. Professionalism really looks a lot like being kind, understanding, and humble. We need fewer polyester politicians. We need more public servants. We live in a time in one of the poorest regions in the state of Ohio, and the people of our country, our county, deserve advocates that are working on their behalfs, not padding their own pockets, not looking out for their own interests. We live in, it isn't as much about the power of the office as it is how the elected official uses her power to act in the best interest of everyone. As the only Republican in a partisan office in Athens County, I don't buckle to political pressures or show favoritism. My loyalty is to good government, transparency, and to all the citizens of Athens County. My record is proven. My experience reflects a high standard of accountability. Transparency only exists outside of one-party rule. Political strong-arming, private meetings, winks, handshakes do not result in transparency, but rather public corruption, poor management, and abuse of power. As your auditor, I've exposed corruption, I've stopped misspending, and I've increased accountability. Transparency exists because of my leadership. Proven experience serves you best when it comes to the office of the county auditor. I'll show up every day, I'll work hard on your behalf, and I've proven to be accessible and accountable. Again, I ask for your vote. Vote Jill Thompson. It's just common sense.
Thank you. Rick?
Well, I feel the need now to point out this is 100% wool. There's no polyester politician here. Let's just get that straight. Thanks, everybody, once again, for being here tonight, taking an active part in our local democracy. Thanks so much to the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. I think we've had a productive exchange here tonight, and I think that I've been able to demonstrate why, after 22 years of one leader, it's time for a new approach in the auditor's office. Look, folks, I don't believe there's a Democrat or a Republican way to conduct county finances. In 4+ years of working in the courthouse, I can't recall a single conversation where anyone brought up what party they were with or where partisanship played a part in any way. And this one-party rule argument, it's an empty one. The fact is that Republicans don't even run for county positions. They're just not interested in serving in that way for whatever reason. We need to move from conflict to collaboration. We need to move from watchdog to guide dog. We need to move from blame to solutions. We need to elect an auditor who has positive relationships around the county and get everyone pulling in the same direction, forward. I hope I've given you a sense of what I want to accomplish and how I'd go about doing it. Now it's up to you. We are privileged to serve you, the voters, in this way, and there's not a single day that I take that for granted. Thank you for coming. Get home safely. Don't forget to vote.
Thank you. I'd like to close this forum. Oh, yes, indeed. I'd like to close this forum by thanking both of our candidates, Jill Thompson and Rick Wasserman, for their participation in our democratic process. It's been a pleasure. I would like to extend our thanks to the City of Athens Government Channel and to Ryan Schwartzoff and Scott for recording this event. The recording will be available on the City of Athens YouTube channel and its Facebook page, and on the League of Women Voters of Athens County Facebook stage. And it will be replayed on the government channel, channel 1024. Finally, I want to thank the people of Athens County and the people who are here tonight for submitting so many thoughtful questions and for joining us to learn more about these candidates. We urge all of you to make a voting plan now. Check your voter registration at voteohio.gov to make sure it is up to date. Early in-person voting begins October 12th, and Election Day is November 8th. You can turn on your phones now and record those 2 dates if you'd like to, so that you don't miss either of them. October 12th, early voting, Election Day, November 8th. Thank you all, and have a good night.